This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chad rebel group FACT admits killing President Idris Deby as AU set to meet over crisis. China hits back at Australia for its sudden cancellation of deals under the Belt and Road Initiative. And looking at the impact of climate change in Africa as world leaders hold climate summit this Earth Day. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up this hour, government delegates and business owners meet in Kinshasa to chart ways of fast-tracking the African Continental Free Trade Area. In sports, Kenya's Michael Olunga scores hat-trick as Al Duhail beat Estigal in AFC Champions League. Let's begin in Chad, where rebel forces from the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, or FACT, say they are preparing to march on the country's capital, N'Djamena. The group has also claimed responsibility for the death of President Idris Deby. According to the armed forces, Deby died Monday of wounds sustained on a visit to the front line, where soldiers were battling the rebels. However, the rebel group has temporarily halted military operations until Deby is buried. Deby's son, Mahamat Idris Deby, has been named interim president by a transitional council of military officers. The council says the army will return Chad to a civilian government and hold elections in 18 months. The rebel group FACT is not linked to jihadist ideologies, and its move to march on the capital threatens more turmoil for the country, which is seen as vital to international efforts to combat militants in Africa's Sahel region. The late President Idris Deby created a formidable military which sharpened its abilities in various counter-terrorism efforts in Africa. Here's Daniel Arap Moi with Chad's military engagements under Deby.
As the fifth largest African nation, Chad sits at a vantage point in the continent despite being landlocked. It straddles north, west, central, and even the Sahel regions of Africa. This has made it one of the key players in regional counter-terrorism efforts. Bordering Chad to the south is the Central African Republic. In 2013, then President Francois Bozize was overthrown by the Seleka rebels. Chad deployed its troops under the African Union peacekeeping mission. However, N'Djamena was forced to pull out after its forces were accused by locals of siding with Seleka militias. The same year, 2013, Chad became the headquarters for the French-led Operation Barkhane to fight jihadists in the Sahel. More recently, Chad has also been playing a leading role in the G5 Sahel Joint Force formed by France to counter militancy in the Sahel region.
Chad has played a very important role in the stability of the Sahel. The Chadian forces, through their leader, President Idris Deby, invested very early and enormously in the fight against terrorism in the Sahel. From the very first moments of the occupation of the northern Mali by the jihadist groups, and especially by Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, we saw that the Chadian forces were truly mobilized. They even won victories, notably in Kidal in the northern Mali, and killed leaders of the terrorist groups AQMI.
In 2015, the Lake Chad region was grappling with the Boko Haram insurgency, which was spilling over from Nigeria. The Chadian military played a key role in dealing with the militants.
Notamment au Mali,
To engage in the fight against terrorism, as President Deby has done, requires that one be truly committed to this fight with the utmost energy. I remember that the leader of the Islamic sect Boko Haram personally addressed President Idris Deby with a lot of bitterness because for him, the Chadian president was their main obstacle. Deby's death will therefore be a major blow in the fight against terrorism. All countries in the sub-region must take the threats of the Chadian rebellion very seriously.
Despite the late President Idris Deby's colorful history in peacekeeping and military interventions in the region, he had also been fighting his wars back home. Before his death, he was battling the fighters of the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, also known as FACT. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN.
The African Union Peace and Security Council is set to meet to discuss the political crises in Chad and Somalia. In Chad, the opposition has rejected the military's appointment of President Idris Deby's son to take over in the wake of his death, while Somalia is also facing a constitutional crisis following an electoral impasse of presidential and parliamentary elections. From Addis, we have Girum Chala joining us live. Girum, what should we expect?
Peninah, first the death of Idris Deby, former president of Chad, and now the rejection of opposition parties in Chad of the coming to power of his son, Mohammed Idris Deby, is creating a lot of worry for the African Union. And some even here are worrying that chaos might follow in that country, making things much more complicated. As you have heard it from the earlier story, the African Union's intention now is to keep Chad as a most important, strong ally in the fight against terrorism in that region, and to keep it as it is intact and avoid any sort of chaos in the middle of all of the happenings at the moment. So the Peace and Security Council is going to meet in a coming hour or two, and they're going to find out ways of preventing such chaoses that are anticipated to happen in the country, and perhaps send a delegation to the country so that they can have consultations with all parties involved in the situation, the government, opposition party, the military, and others. So we're expecting resolutions in this regard in the next few hours. On Somalia, the extension of power for the president, Farmajo, there is also another worrying factor. As you know, Africa has its own charter on democracy, election, and governance, and it rejects any unconstitutional change of power or even extension of power without a constitutional or law, without any law. So they are saying that if Somalia continues this way, it needs to find a better way of handling the political situation in the country, because this is going to create another problem in that country, tensions included. The African Union can even decide to slam some sort of sanctions on Somalia in the next few hours outside of that meeting. So we are hoping that the meeting of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union is going to come up with strong resolutions to address the situations both in Chad and Somalia, Peninah.
All right, Girum, we appreciate that update. Thank you very much. Girum Chala, live in Addis Ababa. Let's bring in our analyst, Justin Dua, from the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. He joins us via Zoom from Addis Ababa. Justin, what can the AU do about the situation in Chad?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that the AU is in a real dilemma, because from the OAU to AU, the principles were clear: condemnation and rejection of unconstitutional change of government. And what is happening now in Chad looks like a coup, because it has all the features of the coup. What AU can do, according to me, is to call for a return to constitutional order, because President Deby died as a president in power, and the constitution of Chad is clear, no matter the circumstances in which he died.
The opposition in Chad is opposed to the military takeover. What alternatives do you think the country had when President Deby died?
Yes, when President Deby died, the only thing they could do is to apply the Article 81 of the Constitution. Article 81 of the Constitution is clear that in the case of vacancy, the President of the National Assembly become a provisional president, and election is organized afresh in at least 45 and 90 at the most. So what could be done would be to declare the death of the president, and the National Assembly chairperson or spokesperson take power. But unfortunately, the situation is now in a way in which another alternative could be an inclusive transition, because the transition in place currently is a purely military one, maybe they could think about an inclusive transition, a transition that include military as well as civilian. That could also work.
All right, Justin, we appreciate those insights. Thank you. Justin Dua from the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, speaking to us via Zoom from Addis Ababa. Now, unknown gunmen have attacked yet another school in Nigeria's northern Kaduna state. At least one person has been killed and an unknown number of students kidnapped. Nigeria is dealing with heightened kidnapping attacks in different parts of the country. Our correspondent Philly Haza reports from Abuja.
The Kaduna State Internal Security and Home Affairs Office confirmed the attack on Greenfield University. A staff member of the private tertiary institution was killed in the attack. However, no details have been given on the number of students abducted. Authorities say a group of gunmen invaded the school on Wednesday evening, shooting sporadically before taking some of the students away. The latest attack is the fifth of its kind on academic institutions in Nigeria since December. In March, 39 students were kidnapped in the same Kaduna state from a federal college of forestry mechanization, and while 10 have been released, 29 remain in captivity. The Kaduna State Police Command says security operatives have been deployed to find and rescue the victims as well as apprehend the perpetrators. President Muhammadu Buhari has warned state governments to desist from paying any form of ransom to kidnappers and urged the armed forces to do more in safeguarding schools and students across the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Australia has cancelled 2 deals between the state of Victoria and China on the Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing has urged Australia to view bilateral relations objectively.
The Australian federal government's decision to veto the Belt and Road Agreement between the Victoria government and China is unreasonable and reckless and disrupts exchange and cooperation. China expresses its strong dissatisfaction and staunch opposition to this. We urge Australia to abandon the Cold War mentality and ideological prejudice, view China-Australia cooperation objectively and rationally, and stop going further down the wrong path and making matters worse.
Victoria Labour Premier Dan Andrews signed 2 agreements with China in 2018 and 2019, saying they would bring Chinese investment to his state. But the federal government says the deals were not in line with Australia's foreign policy. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the deals were cancelled because his federal government doesn't want other levels of government to enter into agreements that conflict with the country's national interests. American lawmakers are intensifying their efforts to counter China. A Senate committee has overwhelmingly passed the Draft Strategic Competition Act, which takes aim at China on multiple fronts. A separate bill aims to increase America's competitive advantage in technology. Both have strong bipartisan support. CGTN's Nathan King reports.
There's a big debate here in Washington and in Beijing and around the world about whether the US and China are on the brink or in a Cold War. And when the history of these times is written, it may be the Strategic Competition Act, just passed out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee here of 2021, that may signal the start of that Cold War. It calls for a whole government approach to China on every level of a new era of what it calls strategic competition. Now, as the Democrat senator said there, it was a bipartisan vote out of committee. It's going to have to be in the full Senate and go to President Biden's desk soon, we understand. Now, what does it do? Essentially, it calls on the military in the Indo-Pacific to have more assets, to be more forward-facing, right up to China, as you know, as it is in Japan, with the freedom and also the freedom of navigation exercises, so-called, in the South China Sea. It also calls for all government departments to appoint people to basically focus on strategic competition with China. That's all government departments, those domestic and international. Quite incredible. It focuses on economics, changing supply chains. It also focuses on competing with China at the international level in organizations like the United Nations and the World Trade Organization. quite an incredible reach. And it's not just this bill either. There's others under consideration as well. The China censorship bill, which will focus on universities having to say how much money they receive from China, which is the biggest investor in universities, although Britain and Canada and Saudi Arabia are up there with them. And also, there are other bills basically putting American money in the industries of tomorrow that they know that China is leading on at the moment. We're talking about 5G, we're talking about lithium batteries for electric cars, we're talking about artificial intelligence. Essentially, what this bill and others are doing is saying, China, we know you're succeeding in modernizing very rapidly, and we see that as a strategic threat. The one exception, of course, is cooperation on climate change. Nathan King, CGTN, just outside the US Capitol.
1:15. This is Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up, we take a look at the impact of climate change in Africa as world leaders hold climate summit this Earth Day. And the fate of cancer patients in Kenya as coronavirus burdens the health system.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Thursday, today, marks the World Earth Day, and to mark it, 40 world leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, will attend a virtual leaders summit on climate hosted by the United States. Meanwhile, EU policymakers have clinched a landmark deal to make the bloc's climate targets legally binding. The bloc's executive arm has also laid out new criteria for what constitutes green investing in hopes that investor confidence will steer huge sums of money into projects that support the bloc's climate goals. Tony Waterman has more from Brussels.
Enshrining these climate pledges into law helps set Europe on a course towards climate neutrality by 2050, which is the overarching goal. And these legally binding targets will now, in many ways, dictate policymaking, spending, and investment for decades to come. After an all-night negotiation, EU member states agreed to not only set that 2050 target in stone, but also the 2030 goal of slashing emissions by at least 55% compared to 1990 levels. This was the big political fight. It's a lower target than the European Parliament had demanded, and some lawmakers were fiercely opposed to carbon sinks like wetlands and forests being included in the reduction calculation. So in a compromise, there will be a cap on how much these carbon sinks count towards the 2030 goal to ensure that the goal is met by member states actually cutting emissions rather than relying on trees to absorb excess carbon. Brussels on Wednesday also unveiled its highly anticipated criteria for what can be labeled a green investment. Things like rechargeable batteries, wind, solar, low-emission cars all have been given the seal of approval, but controversial sectors like natural gas and nuclear energy have been excluded for now, much to the chagrin of Germany and Poland, who see them as transitional energy sources. The hope is that the label will instill investor confidence and steer large sums of money into projects that support the EU's climate goals. And the stakes are very high. Nearly a third of the bloc's $950 billion COVID recovery fund are due to be raised by issuing green bonds. The announcement of these initiatives, of course, comes just a day before U.S. President Joe Biden hosts a virtual climate summit where world leaders, including Xi Jinping, Emmanuel Macron, and Angela Merkel, will discuss tougher climate action. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
Farmers in Nigeria are among those in Africa who have suffered climate change-related losses, estimated at between $7 to $15 billion each year. The African Development Bank says that the impact of climate change on the continent could lead to $50 billion in losses each year by 2040. Our correspondent Phili Haza has more details from Abuja.
This vast and lush vegetation is owned by Solomon Ekwo. Due to the delay in rainfall this season, Solomon says he has had to spend a fortune tapping water from this river for his crops.
In my 10 years of farming, I've not witnessed a delay in rainfall as I have this season. It has made me spend so much on buying fuel, fixing my generator, and producing these vegetables to sell and make a profit.
The majority of farmers in Nigeria still depend on rainfall as a source of water for farming. This has made them vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change like drought and flooding, creating unfavorable conditions for crop production and leading to food shortages and price rises in Nigeria. The AFDB has launched an Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program aimed at mobilizing $25 billion to help scale up access to modern farming methods for at least 30 million farmers in Africa, including in Nigeria. But experts say more steps have to be taken.
It's not about what African Development wants to do and how much money is being put forward, or what the World Bank is doing and how much they're putting forward, or what anybody is doing. It's about critical actions. So when it comes to raising awareness and consciousness, I think we've done fairly well. It's not just about federal government. No, every one of us has a role.
Experts say until farmers in Nigeria are taught how to modernize farming processes like irrigation, hydroponics, and processing, the problem of climate change will continue to overwhelm them.
So if people know that, hey, the rain will not come, are there systems to save rainwaters when they're available? Are there systems to transport water and, use them? And this is where, developing countries should also become a lot more responsible in technology transfer. It's not enough for, for developed parts of the world to have all the solutions and technology without, transferring and exchanging this knowledge with developing countries that suffer the most or the brunt of the problem.
President Muhammadu Buhari has restricted credit facilities to farmers importing food or fertilizers. Rather, a directive has been given to the Central Bank of Nigeria to focus more on funding local farmers, which will in turn reduce food prices in the market and prevent starvation in the country. Solomon hopes that will feed through into higher production levels despite the impacts of climate change. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Let's now bring in Benson Ochieng, the Executive Director of the Institute for Law and Environmental Governance in Kenya. Ben, it's good to have you on the show today. What leaders are gathering for a virtual summit on climate today and tomorrow? What do you see as the priority for African leaders at this summit? Okay, I'm afraid we're having some difficulties connecting with Ben. We shall try and raise him up again. So as the world marks Earth Day today, a 16-year-old environmentalist plans on planting 1 million trees in Uganda's forests. Leah Namugerwa plants hundreds of seedlings each year to celebrate her birthday. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma reports.
In Uganda's forests, deforestation is commonplace. But one young activist is fighting back. 16-year-old Leah Namugerwa has made it her mission to restore the forests of Uganda. She plans to plant 1 million trees within a decade. She uses her birthday as her yardstick.
As a way of restoring Uganda's lost forest cover, I decided to start up a project called Birthday Trees. I celebrated my birthday in 2019 by planting 200 trees. That is when I was turning 15 years old. And I did it again last year when I was turning 16 years old. I planted 500 trees. I plant trees on behalf of people who want to celebrate their birthdays by planting trees.
Today, Namugerwa is joined by Leticia Namulwana in her afforestation mission.
I got inspired to plant trees on my birthday because people are cutting down trees and they're not replacing the trees they are cutting down. And actually, I was inspired by Leah because I met her on social media.
Namugerwa's initiative is gaining traction far beyond the borders of Uganda.
She is using her social media platforms to encourage other young people to plant trees on their birthdays.
I'm getting requests from different people to take on this green idea. I've planted trees for ambassadors from my fellow youth. As we have seen, I've been planting trees with my colleague who chose to celebrate her birthday by planting 100 trees. It is spreading all over the world, and since I started, I've planted over 6,000 trees.
Her target of planting 1 million trees is far from realization. But with every new planting season, more people are joining in.
Every time we carry out an activity, we teach people, we sensitize people of the dangers.
The loss of forest cover represents a climate crisis. Global Forest Watch claims over 12 million hectares of tree cover in the tropics was lost in 2020 alone. If not mitigated, it will greatly affect biodiversity conservation. For young environmentalists like Namugera, the loss of forest is a warning sign and a direct threat to their future. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
The United Nations agency UNAIDS has expressed deep concern over the worsening humanitarian crisis in Cabo Delgado province in Mozambique. The crisis, according to the intergovernmental organization, is also setting back efforts to fight other pressing issues such as HIV and AIDS in that country. This emerged during a virtual press conference held by UNAIDS in South Africa. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela tells us more.
The province of Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique has been under continuous violent attacks allegedly by terrorists. According to the United Nations, the violence there is continuing to escalate. UNAIDS Executive Director Winnie Bianima spent 4 days in the strife-torn province of Mozambique. She was on a mission to assess the plight of displaced people and host communities in the conflict-affected Cabo Delgado province.
Many services are now weakened by attention now being given to a humanitarian crisis. Over 750,000 people have been displaced. That is a huge crisis. So first, there is that situation that needs attention. And then secondly, there is COVID, which has drawn away some of the services for health, not only for HIV, but even for TB and other diseases. So definitely Mozambique is a country that needs support.
UNAIDS is a United Nations organization leading the global fight against HIV and AIDS. The executive director warned that if not brought under control, the humanitarian concerns are likely to impact on neighboring countries.
It's not just a problem in Mozambique. Many countries are also facing these kinds of attacks, especially as they try to develop their natural resources.
The United Nations continues to be on the ground assisting with humanitarian needs.
The United Nations has mobilized food for those who are displaced. We are also on various fronts supporting with medicines, with water and sanitation and so on. But ultimately the solution lies in ending the conflict and people being able to return to their homes, to their farms, to live their lives in peace.
2 weeks ago, South Africa sent troops to northern Mozambique to help secure and repatriate stranded nationals there. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The COVID-19 pandemic has affected many cancer patients in Western Kenya as it led to the closure of screening centers in the region as well as the postponement of treatment programs. Many patients are worried that they now face increased exposure to the coronavirus. But as CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports, some are still soldiering on despite the challenges.
Riding a wheelchair is no ordinary job for Nancy Omolo, the mother of one. Omolo lost both her limbs to cancer 2 years ago. Omolo was perfectly well until doctors diagnosed her with breast cancer that quickly spread through her legs, leading to the amputation.
Much as I thought of ignoring it, it kept on crossing my mind.
Then I just convinced myself, like, anyway, death is death. People do die. Because when you think of cancer, you relate it to death. So I was like, death is there. And if I'm going to die out of cancer, I'll die. But I'm not going to let myself be distracted because of it.
Despite being on a wheelchair, Omolo sees the hope of living with dignity, providing for her family's needs and making sure that her daughter gets an education.
I'll move on with my plans. I'll do my things the way I had planned. And at least even if I die, I'll leave my daughter in a better place, like I've done something.
These had been our main concerns when life took a tragic turn.
Omolo's story is simply proof of the incredible resilience of many cancer patients, not only in Western Kenya, but across Africa.
Omolo, just like many cancer patients in Africa, has suffered loss of livelihood and severe financial stress due to the COVID-19 restrictions on movement and social gathering. But she found hope at the Africa Cancer Foundation, which helped set up a vegetable garden to provide for her daily dietary needs.
In January, we found a very sick cancer of the esophagus patient who had been sent home by doctors to go and gain some weight and nourish his body because his body had become too weak for treatment. And he could not swallow anything. Everything needed to be blended. And when we went there, they had nothing, no fresh vegetables, nothing. Their land is bare, and his wife is his primary caregiver and does not even have time to go out to the shamba and do anything. And we set up 2 cone gardens for him.
This cancer patient, most of them, they are advised when they're going chemotherapy and radiotherapy, they are advised to eat a lot of leafy vegetables. And this kind of technology can only take 21 days, and then they start harvesting their vegetables.
When the vegetable garden was set up, Omolo had not imagined what a blessing it would be in the coming days and months.
I'm so happy. I'm realizing that there are still so many people who care about cancer patients.
According to the World Health Organization Regional Office for Africa, approximately 70% of deaths from cancer occur in low and middle income countries. Many who are still alive remain in dire need of nutrients, with most of them malnourished, a situation Africa Cancer Foundation says is not good for their treatment journey. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Kisumu, Kenya.
Meanwhile, the Kenyan government plans to vaccinate all teachers and education support staff in the country. The move has been welcomed by many parents ahead of the resumption of schools in May. CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports.
Kenya's education calendar has been greatly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And with just weeks to go before schools are reopened, the Kenyan government is making arrangements for all teachers to be vaccinated. Peter Amunga, who is a senior teacher and also an official of the Kenyan National Union of Teachers, has already been vaccinated. He is upbeat as he prepares for the new school term.
A vaccine, especially for teachers over COVID-19, is very important. So we have taken it that it is good for us. It's good to safeguard our lives. And because we are frontline workers, we are mixing with learners every day, we have taken it positively that vaccination is important.
This school is getting ready for yet another unpredictable term. Many teachers have come here well ahead of reopening day so as to prepare for the work ahead.
Prepare your child well, teach them about this pandemic, let them know what it's all about. Prepare them and look for a mask for them.
How far are you with your work?
Rachel Angatia, who is a mother of 2, is preparing for school term ahead too. Her children, Tumaini and Talia, are finishing their school assignments and revising work done earlier. In a few weeks' time, the children will be back in class. As a mother, she has concerns about the safety of the young learners.
We have the 3rd wave of the COVID-19 with us now, and we have really tried to keep these children safe. We have ensured that they stay in the house. We have ensured that they put on masks when they leave, and we supervise. We are here to supervise even when we go out. We're able to supervise their putting on of masks and all that. But now when we release them to go to the school van or the school bus, it becomes a bit tricky because they're children. At the end of the day, they're children, and they will drop their masks.
Kenya's Teachers Service Commission says the country has lost 8 head teachers, 3 deputy head teachers and 15 teachers to the COVID-19 pandemic. It has instructed teachers' health insurance providers to ensure that they provide medical cover for teachers seeking treatment for any COVID-19 related ailments. For many parents, the vaccination of teachers is a welcome move.
I think it is best that they be vaccinated. It is best. We have better chances for the safety of our children if the teachers are vaccinated as compared to when they are not.
The new school calendar will be starting off here in Kenya in a few weeks. Parents, teachers and even pupils and students are hoping that this time round there'll be seamless coverage of syllabus without hiccups. It's been almost 2 years of inconsistency and so many students are also failing the exams or performing dismally, courtesy of the gaps. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Coming up in business news, government delegates and business owners meet in Kinshasa, DR Congo to chart ways of fast-tracking the African Continental Free Trade Area. And Tanzania is set to start exporting purified gold after launching its first refinery.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Delegations from Europe, the US, the Middle East, Asia and 19 member states of the African Union's Shippers Councils have converged in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The delegates are discussing ways of fast-tracking the implementation of a single market for goods and services under the African Continental Free Trade Area. The initiative is the first major event on the AFCFTA since the start of the pandemic last year.
African leaders in the freight sector are in the DRC capital, Kinshasa, to hammer out details of a collaboration to enable them to boost trade on the continent. Their meeting is a follow-up on an initiative that was signed by 44 African countries in 2018, known as the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's an ambitious trade agreement that seeks to create a market where goods and services will move freely. The DRC president, Felix Tshisekedi, believes the initiative will lift millions of Africans out of poverty.
The start of trading under this initiative has shown that we will become economically independent in Africa. I want to declare that my desire is to see this collective effort transform our economies.
Africa is endowed with a lot of natural resources, but most of its exports are unprocessed. The leaders here hope to change that.
When we are going to fight as a bloc, then we are strong. But if we are going individually, we will not be strong. And the sense of African continental free trade area is that we need to be a bloc, a strong bloc of Africa.
The quest to integrate African economies has been expressed by many African leaders for decades, but political differences and poor infrastructure has blighted that goal. The DRC is a member of the Southern African Development Community, an intergovernmental organization that's set to benefit from the removal of trade barriers in Africa.
I think that this agreement presents opportunities on both sides, for DRC as well as for South Africa. For export of trade in goods, export of trade in services, for the establishment of linkages and regional value chains, to make sure that we accelerate industrial development on both sides.
Many African economies have been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has made this push for economic integration a priority. The officials here plan to come up with a resolution about easing business regulations across the continent on Thursday. Chris Sochamringa, Kinshasa.
Tanzania is set to start exporting purified gold following the planned launch of its first ever refinery. Based in the northern city of Mwanza, the first of its kind refinery is a joint venture between the State Mining Corporation and the private sector and will be able to purify gold by up to 99.9%. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
A modern gold refinery facility is scheduled for launch in Tanzania this month. With a capacity to refine 480 kilograms of gold a day and possibly extending to 960 kilograms, it will be the largest refinery in East Africa.
The presence of a refinery will enable our small-scale miners to first obtain a reliable market, get a definite price, and also be able to sell their gold in a secure place.
At a cost of $3.8 million, it is expected to not only increase the country's revenue, but also create direct employment to some 120 Tanzanians. Once open, the plant will rank third in Africa in terms of processing capacity.
I believe this refinery will help many people from outside the country sell their minerals, because there are countries out there that do not mine but have refineries and sell a lot of gold.
The commencement of the refinery's operations is expected to settle a long-standing legal issue surrounding Tanzania's ban on the export of unprocessed minerals, which has been in place since 2017. The country exports gold mainly to South Africa, India, and Switzerland. Tanzania is Africa's fourth largest gold producer after South Africa, Ghana, and Mali. The Central Bank of Tanzania reports that earnings from gold exports rose 34% last year, helped by increased output and higher prices. With over $3 billion worth of gold exports last year, the government sees mining as a key driver of economic growth. It says it plans to do more to uplift the sector.
The government will continue to give priority to smaller scale miners, which includes setting aside mining areas, providing licenses, and giving them access to simple technologies for extraction and processing of minerals.
The refinery is one of 3 that are set to be built in the country. Through the refinery, Tanzania hopes to get higher gold prices, reducing smuggling, uplifting the mining sector and the economy in the process. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Senegal relies heavily on domestically grown food, with 60% of the population depending on agriculture to survive, according to the World Bank. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy brings you the story of one entrepreneurial approach to agriculture that has been welcomed by many local smallholder farmers who are always looking for better ways to increase their productivity.
After graduating school, Sulemani Inye decided to follow a professional training in horticulture. That training is what marked his first steps in the agriculture sector.
It all started when I was a student at the National Horticulture School. I just made one observation. In most schools, we are often taught the same classical cultures like pepper, tomato, potato, etc. At one point, we wondered why can't we grow some other rare crops? And often, the answers that came back was that it was not possible in Senegal. It was not possible in any other African country.
Strawberry production is not common in Senegal. And after doing many trial runs, Sulemani decided to try growing local organic sweet strawberries in 2016. Frazen produces and commercializes only 100% organic strawberries, a challenge in Senegal where water is scarce.
We had the simple idea of bringing together all the producers who had fields and producing strawberries together, and this is what gave birth to the Frisian network. At a certain point, we told all the farmers who wanted to start growing strawberries to come and join us in our network. We support them with trainings, with funding, and we assist them in the production and marketing.
Sulemani and his partner's latest venture is Bei Sedu, a platform that links farmers with investors. It allows individual farmers to buy parts in a field for 1 to 2 crop rotations from a landowner. and then share the dividend. This allows the owner to make a profit from land that would otherwise be left unused. At the end of the growing season, Bei Sedu takes charge of the distribution of the dividends between the different stakeholders following predetermined criteria. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Experts across the continent have been giving their take on the just concluded Boao Forum for Asia held in Hainan. The 20th anniversary conference covered various topics from digital currencies to carbon neutrality and the economic outlook for a post-pandemic world. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the forum. Experts in Zambia had this to say about that forum.
The speech by President Xi today is a strong commitment to the vision of building a community of shared future for mankind. China is looking to the bigger picture of the world rather than just looking to herself. And several speeches, President Xi has said no to protectionism, has said no to unilateralism, and rather he is speaking for multilateralism, openness, and ensuring that all nations working together and making sure that development is happening for all.
President Xi his point about multilateralism. I found that very important. He is right to state that it is important to deepen multilateralism in today's world. Multilateralism, as exemplified by the United Nations, offers the only future for the world. You know, we have a shared future, a common destiny. And through multilateralism, as President Xi implied, global problems can be tackled. The challenges of climate change, challenges of instability, challenges of crime, international terrorism, and so forth and so on. So we do need multilateralism.
You're watching Africa Live, still to come after the break. Egypt reopens the Royal Mummies Hall, displaying 22 restored mummies of kings and queens.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Egypt, a Royal Mummies Hall has been inaugurated and has opened its doors to the public at Cairo's National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. It contains 22 mummies of kings and queens who lived more than 3,000 years ago. They have been restored and are being displayed using the latest technology. Yasser Hakim has more on that story.
The Museum of Egyptian Civilization is the latest addition to Egypt's tourism circuit. It showcases the country's history and culture, from the Stone Age all the way to the contemporary Islamic civilization.
The National Museum for Egyptian Civilization is meant to be one of the top 3 museums in Egypt, including the Cairo Museum behind me there, as well as the Grand Egyptian Museum, due to be opened at the end of 2021. And this National Museum of Egyptian Civilization has a different theme than the other 2.
The Royal Mummies Hall is its unique centerpiece. It contains the rare mummies of kings and queens from the Second Dynasty more than 3,000 years ago. They had been moved to the hall from the Cairo Museum in a breathtaking golden parade. A team of 4 archaeologists carried out a complicated 3-year process of restoring the mummies. They were led by Dr. Mustafa Ismail.
The most difficult mummy to restore was Ramses VI. It was found in 187 pieces. What did we do? We took the same material that was used to restore the mummy of King Seti from the same era. We developed it and used it on this mummy. All the modern technology in this process was related to developing the restoration material for them. Ramses' mummy, with its 187 pieces, were placed in a box at Cairo Museum for 140 years. When you see them now at the Museum of Civilization, you will find a big difference than when it was stored in Cairo Museum.
Media and visitors are not allowed to take their cameras inside the hall, but to receive exclusive pictures before the inauguration. The mummy's new home is designed to take you back 3,000 years to the setting of an underground royal tomb. The mummy's cases were specially developed as well.
The base of the case is made from 100% linen to absorb any shocks without affecting the mummy's textures. The cushion is the base under the mummy. It's made from fiber, not cotton or tissue, because it can delicately conform with the shape of each body without breaking it, and it is highly resistant as well. There is a barcode next to every mummy. You scan it and you get all the info about the mummy and the life of its owner on a screen and monitor. The lighting in the hall is very low, not to damage the mummies.
Whilst most of the current visitors are Egyptians, the museum is waiting for foreign tourists to pour in once international travel resumes. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Coming up in sports, Kenya's Michael Olunga scores a hat-trick as